Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Ongoing political saga in Zimbabwe of the factional war between the Mnangagwa faction and Chiwenga faction rages on. Over the weekend, Mnangagwa launched what can only be classified as the bribe to the war veterans by their silence and their support. And at the gathering was one of the former war veterans leaders, Jabulani Sibanda. And he is reportedly told the gathering that the trees grows in two directions. The ordinary people are the leaves and the flowers, and the war veterans are the roots that provided the stability of the nation's independence. And he and his colleagues are the stability of Zimbabwe's independence. The irony of it all is Jabulani Sibanda doesn't seem, and his war veteran friends do not even appreciate that the country's economic and political mess is because of the country's failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And he and his colleagues have as much to blame what has happened in the country as the Zanu PF leadership itself. The war veterans have been the vanguard of the imposition of the de facto one-party state in Zimbabwe. That is a reality, a political reality that we cannot deny. Jabulani Sibanda and these war veterans have been at the heart of the creation and imposition of the de facto one-party state in Zimbabwe. That is the reality. And one can ask, therefore, people like him, what role did the 2008 Operation Mavhotera Papi, of which our friend Jabulani Sibanda was at the heart of it, have played the barbarism of that Operation Mavhotera Papi? How has that provided stability to the country? Here is a video clip just to remind everybody of what actually happened in 2008.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose, watofunga kuti Zanu yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei? Kati atomamira zvakaita takatodini katida sei manje? Mama tikati abvudzai baba nitaure navo. Baba gadzirai politburo, cabinet. Musarangarira zvimwe zvipi, gadzirai chi cabinet. Asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 maresults abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusuru, we know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
Zimbabwe is a de facto one-party state. War veterans have got to admit it to themselves that they played a key role in imposing that one-party state. Even now, with the benefit of hindsight, it beggars belief that people like Jabulani Sibanda should still consider themselves the roots of the nation's independence, providing stability. He even have the arrogance of considering only the suffering of the war veterans. As if the rest of the nation is thriving and it's only the war veterans who are suffering. The truth of the matter is the whole country is suffering. The bribe that Mnangagwa was providing here in this so-called Presidential War Veteran Fund is nothing. Few months down the line, the same war veterans will be back begging. The same war veterans in 2017 are the ones who imposed Mnangagwa on the nation. This idea that the war veterans are special is at the heart of why Zimbabwe, we are a failed state. We sometimes think of Mashefs as only the ruling elite, the ministers, the MPs, and so forth. But the truth of the matter is that mentality is carried through by all the war veterans. When they compare themselves to the ordinary Zimbabweans, they consider themselves to be Mashef, demigods, who alone can be entrusted with country's sovereignty, independence, and who alone should have a meaningful vote, because they know what is good for the country. The rest of the populace, no, you don't know what is good for the country. That is at the heart of why we are a failed state. Yes, Dr. Simba Makone explaining this very concept of Mashef and how this mentality is permeated in Zimbabwe society.
I recall very clearly that when we came into office in 1980, we inherited Ian Smith's systems. And Ian Smith's ministers drove Peugeot 504s. They drove themselves from home to work in their Land Rovers and all in kinds. Most of them were farmers. They parked their Land Rover and then they used the government vehicle when they were at work with a chauffeur. When they finished at night, they packed them and they took theirs to go home. Within the month of our coming into office, Prime Minister Mugabe then directed that every minister be issued with an E-class Mercedes-Benz. And the Peugeot 504s were retired to permanent secretaries, and the deputy ministers who then took over. We can also look at many other things, small they may appear at the time. Let me hazard that even at that point, Enos Nkala was our Minister of Finance. I don't think we knew what budget we inherited from Ian Smith when the decision was taken to buy those E-class fleets for the ministers. So the material affection for material things has always been with us. And the differentiation also, even going back into the camps, Zemashefu, Neze, my comrades, Makada, were not the same. So much so that even today, when the so-called Minister for Presidential Affairs or Provincial Governor, as they were, goes to Bubi or Binga, they will be served separately and differently from the other people. The avarice grew as we began to exploit the opportunities of office. When I was in the government, the minister was allocated one vehicle that they kept, which was the sedan they used in town. If you needed to go off-road, then your ministry hired off-road vehicles from the CMED, and you were charged for it. Now a minister will have an average of 4 vehicles in his forecourt, all at government's expense.
So the leadership modeled the wrong kind of behavior, and that kind of behavior permeated all across our society. Our CEOs, like you're saying, heads of parastatals and so forth, modeled from the top.
Indeed. Indeed. I made a passing reference that we have CEOs who will buy themselves a luxury car when they can't pay wages at the end of the week or end of the month. This has been so entrenched in our psyche, this showing off, as if you are a different person, you're breathing different air from those who don't drive Prados and Land Cruisers, from those who don't drive Jeep Cherokees. We have lost our humanity. There's lots of reference to Ubuntu, very farcical, superficial, not coming from the heart. We have changed. We have changed because of our appetite for power. And we have changed because of our avarice for material things. I think when we begin to associate a position of authority and responsibility with material well-being and acquisitions, that's when the rot set in. A Toyota Cressida isn't worth much compared to 6 kgs of gold and 15 billion worth of Marange diamonds and backhanders on contracts to pave 200 kilometers of roads. So when
I think that explanation is adequate, but I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that it only applies to those higher up in the food chain. The truth of the matter is, it applies just as much to the war veterans. When the war veterans see themselves, they consider themselves as the chefs, the people who, as Jabulani Sibanda put it, are the root of Zimbabwe's independence. As much as the war veterans may argue that Mnangagwa has failed, as they argued before that Mugabe had failed, they still believe that they alone should be the ones who decides who rules next. The ordinary Zimbabweans have no say in the matter. This is what is wrong with our political system. We have got liberators who becomes first-class citizens and have got the rights not only to have a meaningful say, but to deny other people the same right, a meaningful say in the governance of the country. People like Jabulani Sibanda do not see anything wrong with their role in making sure that Zanu PF remains in office, in imposing the one-party state on the country. They are unhappy with Mnangagwa, but they are hell bent on making sure that the next president is a Zanu PF president. And in the picture here, we see Nelson Chamisa quoting war veterans. The opposition have always been bending over backwards, as if to say, without the endorsement of the war veterans, any aspiration to rule Zimbabwe is a waste of time. And I think war veterans like Jabulani Sibanda and others have embraced that. At the present moment, they do not think anyone who did not fight in the war should rule the country. And so people like Chamisa would be entertained only for a short period, but at the present moment, the focus is on Zanu PF. This is the mentality that has destroyed the country. No one has the divine right to rule the country. No one has the divine right to deny other Zimbabweans the right to a meaningful vote. That has got to be at the heart of it. What Jabulani Sibanda and his fellow war veterans did during Operation Mavhotera Papi, for instance, was the very epitome of what is wrong with their mentality. And they should be the ones to come out and admit it, that they were wrong. And the number one issue which they should be engrossed with right now is that war veterans did not earn, are not the chefs, do not have the divine right to decide who governs Zimbabwe. That right should be the right of all the people of Zimbabwe in a free, fair, and credible election. And let's get away from this madness of war veterans imposing Zanu PF on the nation. We know that people like Blessed Geza is hell-bent on imposing Chiwenga, just as the other side faction of the war veterans is hell-bent on keeping Mnangagwa in power. This is not what the fight is all about. The fight for independence was for one man, one vote, where every Zimbabwean would have a meaningful vote. Other countries like Botswana, South Africa, they are politically stable because they embrace that idea. In Zimbabwe, our war veterans were brainwashed by Zanu PF leaders like Robert Mugabe into believing that the war of independence was about creating a de facto one-party state, and that they, as war veterans, will be playing their real role by maintaining the Zanu PF in power. And unfortunately, some of our war veterans are still sold to that idea. Zimbabwe is fighting to end the dictatorship, not just to remove one dictator and replace him with another. That is the number one message that all war veterans out there must get and get right, or we'll be going round and round in circles on this issue. Think about it. Thank you very much for listening.